And we're rolling. Father.
Son.
This is Tuhon and Son. And Dad, you are Tuhon. Tell the martial arts world, although some of them know what a Tuhon is. Who are you and what is your rank?
Well, my name is Philip Gelina. My rank in Pekiti-Tirsia Cali is Mandala Tuhon. I'm what is known as a 12 Hagdan. I'm not really sure where that puts me in the stratosphere, but it means that I'm higher than a 1. And it means that over the 33 years I've been practicing this art, that I've received a little bit of recognition.
And I came from his loins and beat out all the other sperm to get the mom's eggs. And that is the last athletic thing I think I've done, known to record. That's the only karate competitions I've ever won. Mm-hmm. This show and anyone who's listening is pretty much because I know Dad. Dad is the man who made me my Halloween costumes as a kid, because back in the 80s when costumes of Spider-Man consisted of a picture of him on a smock and a plastic mask, Dad would get all Houdini with some a mix of Houdini and MacGyver with some sweatsuits, and we would make the costumes and stuff. But you know, my dad was always like, "Yeah, he's that martial arts," and my friends were like, "Oh man, your dad's so scary." He's like, "Why?" "Because you can beat people up, man." I'm like, "Yeah, but I guess I can contest that he's probably good at it because he doesn't go around telling everybody." It's kind of like the equivalent to my world. I'm a musician, and like when someone walks around holding their guitar, though they're not going anywhere to particularly play it, you know they're just holding it to show people, "Hey, look, I'm a musician. Notice me," because everyone who's actually a musician, if they don't have to carry their gear, they will hire some guy with a Skinner t-shirt to carry it for them and a drinking problem. But, yeah. For every legend, there is an origin story. Today we talk about the origin of Tuhon, Sled Dog, and other names I can't pronounce. Philip Gelina. Dad, how the hell did you find out about martial arts? Like, you grew up in Hudson. Like, you were born and bred amongst not Jack Clampett type of community, but definitely not. And this was like, what decade was this?
I was born in 1952, so I was living in Hudson from about 1956, 57 onwards, till about 1970 when I moved into Montreal.
Okay, so there was like, it's not like a major metropolitan type of situation, nor did you live in an age where if you wanted to find out about martial arts, all you had to really do was type in a couple of letters in Google, and after you horrendously misspell the martial art in question, it corrects you and then sends you where you want to go.
Yeah, exactly. As a matter of fact, Hudson, at the time I was interested in doing martial arts, I think the Trans-Canada Highway that went through Rigaud on the way to Montreal has just been built. It wasn't built before that. So there was, if you wanted to go into Montreal, you had to go along the main road or Highway 17 through Vaudreuil, Dorion, St. Anne's, and all those other little towns with stoplights and everything. So going into Montreal was not an easy task. And so you just didn't do it very often. I mean, imagine that Fairview Pointe Claire was like an enormous thing to happen when that shopping center was built. Yeah. Because we could go into some place and see all those shops without having to go all the way into Montreal. Yeah. Almost like Jed Clampett, you're right. Anyway, Montreal was something that, martial arts was something I wanted to do. I think I started wanting to do martial arts around 1965 or 66. My father bought me a black belt magazine, which was like the only magazine available in those days.
Why exactly? What made him say, "I'm going to buy him black belt or Archie"?
Well,
and I'm going to get him black belt.
I had expressed a desire to do martial arts, and I don't know why or how.
By fighting with your 4 brothers?
Well, no, actually, there was the fighting part with my 4 brothers. Well, actually, I had 3 brothers, but fighting with my 3 brothers wasn't as big a deal as, I think there was a guy by the name of Doug Rogers. And he was a judo practitioner. And in 1964, at the 1964 Olympics in Tokyo, he won a silver medal. And I don't know why that transformed me. I just thought to myself, boy, this is what I want to do.
How did you find out about this?
It was being written up in the various magazines. My father was a professional photographer, and so there'd be all sorts of articles you'd read and things that you'd read that he had taken the pictures to go along with. And so as a result, he brought home something from the Montreal Star called, I think it was a weekend magazine or something like that. And there was an article on Doug Rogers. When he came back from Tokyo, he'd become a pilot for Canadian Airlines. And I read about it and I got excited. And I started sending away for books in that magazine. They would have back books on different things. I think I bought a book on ninjutsu way before ninjutsu was popular. And I'd sort of like read about this stuff. And somebody in my high school had a judo gi that they were selling, and I bought it for $5. And I ran around the backyard of my house every day, all summer long.
What's the currency? Well, let's say what's the time-wise currency? Like, how much would $5 go back then go for today?
Well, I don't know, but it just seemed like a great deal.
Well, it seems like a king's ransom back then, because...
well, it was a lot more than it is now. I mean, this is like 1968, 69.
I spent $5 on comic books, and they used to be a fucking nickel, so you know what I mean?
Yeah, there's that. No, I think, for example, in 1970, I had my first job, and I think I got paid $60 a week, and that was like $1.50 an hour.
50.
Actually, I worked before that. I was working for the Beauregard's grocery store as a greengrocer, and I was making $35 a week for a summer. And I was there from early morning to late night, so I was probably working about 50, 60 hours a week for that, and thinking that I was well paid in the bargain. So anyway, I was getting that uniform. It wasn't even so much how much it cost. It was the fact that it was available. I mean, you had a real uniform, real karate-type pants, real judo-type pants, a belt, a jacket, something that you could put your imagination. I mean, you were talking about dressing up like a superhero. As far as I was concerned, it was the same thing.
Mm-hmm. And I find this fascinating that it's all because of this pilot, you know? Like, essentially, it's all because of some pilot. Because back then, like, the very idea of a martial arts movie, like, we can go to the video store and rent hundreds upon hundreds of mainstream martial arts movies in this day and age. But back then, it was kind of like this obscure type of, like, what? You like that Asian stuff? Like,
well, you know, it's funny because there were a lot of television shows that actually showed martial arts and presented it as a very exotic martial art, a very exotic activity. There was a TV show called Danger Man and Secret Agent with Patrick McGowan, who eventually did, I believe, TV show The Prisoner. Anyway, he did a couple of shows, and they had some karate guys catching arrows and doing stuff like that. And that was in the 1960s. And about 1968 or 69, there was a Canadian program hosted by a guy named Pierre Burton, and he interviewed Bruce Lee. So we actually were doing a lot of stuff. We just didn't let anybody know we were doing it. Yeah. Montreal was a hotbed of martial arts activity as much as it could be. That guy I was talking about, Doug Rogers, did most of his training at the YMCA in downtown Montreal and the René Lalonde Judo Club on Stanley Street, which ironically is just around the corner and down the street from where I have my club now. And history, yeah. Anyway, in 1967, there was a guy in Montreal. Actually, he was a hairdresser in Hudson. And he was an orange belt in his karate school, and he brought the sensei, the head teacher, and a few of his black belts out, and they did a demonstration at this, I guess it was a community YMCA type place in the old St. Thomas Aquinas School gymnasium, and they did this thing, and I was so excited, I couldn't believe it. Real people wearing real black belts. And anyway, so that was in March of 1967, and then they had some classes that proceeded afterwards. They didn't go so well. I mean, we didn't attract a huge amount of people. And quite honestly,
give me a ballpark. How many?
5.
I don't mean to laugh at that. I'm just saying it's just like, you know, when you have a demonstration
Well, no.
I played a lot of shows where the only people who watched me were the other bands, so that's what makes me like. Was the 5 including the people?
No, they only came out for one day, and I think there were more people than that. I mean, of course, people were curious, and so they would come up and watch.
Yeah.
But it was interesting. So the guy was teaching, and he was supposed to teach through the summer, and he kind of stopped around June because nobody was going. And I mean, of course, I was still running around trying to do stuff. And in the fall, I started pursuing him a bit, and he had decided that he was going to go back to class. And so he would finish early on Tuesdays and Thursday evenings, and he would get in his Volkswagen Beetle and go into Montreal. And so I managed to get a ride with him. He only lasted about a month or so training, and then he said he was stopping. He wasn't going to go any further. So my mother, I don't know why.
God rest her soul.
God rest her soul. Permitted me to hitchhike into Montreal at 14 a couple of times a week to take.
Well, you're learning how to defend yourself anyway. I guess we'll figure out if it works.
No, it's more like, well, you don't seem to have any direction in your life at the moment as it is. So if we let you do this, maybe this will give you some direction. So I'm presuming that that's what she was thinking, because that's what I was doing. And I would go along. I would leave high school, I guess about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I would hitchhike along the main road until I got to the Trans-Canada Highway, and I would hitchhike, put my thumb out at the entrance, because you couldn't really do it on the highway itself, because they had all these no hitchhiking things. And I would get picked up by these people, and I would get a ride into Montreal, somewhere near the Décarie Expressway. And the school that they taught at was on Côte-des-Neiges, right at the corner of Barclay. So it was pretty close to the entrance. So if I could get somewhere near the Décarie Expressway, and I'd gone to school in Montreal for a couple of years as a kid, so I wasn't unfamiliar with the bus lines. And then I would take the 10 o'clock bus, the 10 o'clock train home. And that's what I did.
10 o'clock train home, how long? What time would you say, okay, you leave the house at what time, you get home at what time?
I'd leave the house at 10 or 8 in the morning. To take
10 in the morning, okay.
Or no, I'd leave the house at 8 in the morning, go to school for the day, leave school, basically tell my mother I was going to do my homework some other time, but I never actually did it those days. And then I would hitchhike. I'd leave Montreal and I'd get a ride in. And I was fortunate because there was a couple of guys, a couple of teachers who kind of took pity on me. And whenever they would go into Montreal, or at least go near the highway, they would give me a ride.
You know any of their names? You give them a shout out right now if they're still
no, I don't.
If they're still alive, they could be like, I helped him.
Yeah, well, I don't remember. I apologize if any of you are out there. I apologize, but I don't.
Okay.
Anyway, that was my beginning,
and your first discipline was called what?
My first class teacher was a gentleman by the name of Tran Quang Ba. He was a sensei of the Chito-ryu style. He was also a professor of political science at the University of Montreal. And those guys that came in as black belts, they were Peter Ross and James Ross. They were the 2 older brothers. Mike Ross was the younger brother. And I knew them for many years after that, because they were the people teaching karate at the downtown YMCA for quite a few years. So anyway, it was just off the campus of the University of Montreal. And I was there for a short period of time. When I say short period of time, they moved, but they didn't really move. So I guess in December of 1969, when I had moved into Montreal, in the fall of 1969.
How old are you?
I was 17, I guess.
He's moved into Montreal with the family, though. Right?
Well, yes, moved into Montreal with the family. We moved into Westmount, Lewis Avenue.
I know, I used to play in the backyard there.
I know, I'm just telling you, I'm just giving credence to actually have been there.
Yeah, I just want to shamelessly involve myself on my tricycle. Okay. Like 20, 30 years later. Mm.
Anyway, I was there, and I would hope to train there. And so he actually they just stopped showing up one day, and I suspect that they just didn't think of me as being a very positive member of their group, because nobody called me to let me know. So I stopped going, and at that same time I was training, and then I bumped into some people I knew at Dawson College.
Okay.
And there was a guy who had moved to Montreal from New York, a guy named Conley Darling. And he was a practitioner of Japanese Kempo. And I practiced with him from about 1970 through to about 1973. And I worked really hard. I tried as hard as I could. And I eventually got my black belt. I think I was a green belt or something close to it from the Chitoryu style. But whatever I was doing kind of fell to nothing. I didn't really know where else to go. I wasn't directed as an optional thing to go anywhere else. And I don't know if there were that many Chitoryu schools available in Montreal. It was very strong in Ottawa. It did not have a lot of practitioners in Montreal compared to other styles like Kyokushinkai and I guess the other ones.
And as someone who has no idea what you're talking about,
okay,
which, you know, some other people might, but I have a feeling a lot of people will. This day and age, everybody's like, you know, going in, comparing everything to MMA, and it's like, oh, how does he bring it to the octagon? In this style you're talking about right now, what kind of style would you describe it as?
Well, in from about 1950 through to about 1970, the strongest style or styles were the Japanese karate styles, because they basically made the rules, and they'd come in there, they'd all look all like, we're the toughest things going, and they'd have their white karate uniforms and their black belts against the white uniforms, and you know, most of these guys were, you know, would yell out things in Japanese, and you'd think that they really knew what they were talking about because they all spoke this rather exotic language, and they all, you know, if you were a black belt, you knew stuff for sure. Realistically, most of their stuff, it's not that they've been debunked, but the idea of pretending to hit somebody is not the best way to learn how to fight. If you wish to learn how to fight, now, a lot of people may be listening to me and going, I know, but in true martial arts, you should be learning how not to fight. Excuse me, but that's ridiculous. That's like saying, I'm going to not talk because I'm going to learn how to sing. How do I learn how to sing? By not singing. Or how about I can learn how to swim by not swimming? Sounds absurd, doesn't it? Well, if you want to learn how to fight, you got to learn to fight. You can't do it by not fighting.
That's the case. I'm the best in the world.
And I'm awesome.
I'm so amazing. I can't remember the last time I've been in a
Anyway, there are a lot of people who practice karate who are good fighters. And if you were asking about the UFC, there are a lot of people who have been in the UFC who are extremely good, and they have a very traditional karate background. Leo Tomashita is the one who comes to mind first, but Chuck Liddell had a Hawaiian Kajukenbo, which is a type of karate background. And there's a lot of guys out there who, traditional martial artists, John Jones practices traditional karate. There's a few guys who are tournament champions who have done very well in the UFC. So the idea is not to look at and say, this technique doesn't work. It's just that you can't believe stuff is going to work simply because somebody tells you. You should, basically like any science experiment, you should say, if I want to prove something, I should go out and prove it by practical and empirical methods, which means you try it. And if it doesn't work, then you try it again. And then you come up, you know, when you've done enough experiments that work or don't work, then you use the empirical method to decide that it is correct or is incorrect.
You know so many disciplines, and you're very high ranking in so many of these disciplines. Is there a particular style, like, you must have tried a couple of styles where you're just like, meh. And it don't mean they're bad styles, it's just, that's
exactly it. They aren't bad styles. One of the things that I'm not going to say who, but I finally gave myself the permission to not like everything certain people do. Because sometimes you get involved in stuff and you get kind of swept along because the person themselves is so charismatic, and what they do is considered so high in evolution that you figure that if I don't believe it, then, well, you start realizing that there's a reason why stories like The Emperor's New Clothes were written.
I was thinking that exact same thing. As long as you say, well, if you don't like it, it means you're an idiot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I gave myself the permission to not like certain things. And basically I've given myself the permission to not like everything everybody else does. Not because it's not good, because for me, it's not good. Mm-hmm. And I am the last arbiter. I'm the final arbiter of my own taste. I shouldn't be slavishly following somebody else simply because somebody else says it's good. Because it's not that it isn't good. But, for example, there's a kind of food that they want you to eat in the Philippines. It's called balut. And what balut is, it's an egg that's been fertilized. And then it's almost a chicken, but then they cook it.
That's disgusting.
No, but anyway.
No.
A lot of people...
That is disgusting.
And a lot of people want you to eat this. When you go over there, they say, I'll show the guy. And they try to make you eat balut. Yeah. I refuse to eat balut.
Oh, good for you.
But, everybody goes, that's one of the benefits of being a high-ranking guy. I can go, no. And they'll listen to you.
Oh, no.
People say, it tastes just like chicken. They say the same thing about rats. I wouldn't eat that either.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So, you moved to Montreal.
I moved to Montreal in 1969.
Yeah.
I guess that was 1969, 1970.
You're rocking.
Yeah, I was like 19. I would be 17 years old, turning 18 in November.
Becoming a man.
Illegally, anyway.
At least in Canada.
And, yeah. Anyway, so that's what I did, and I trained with Constantine by his name, Connie. He was actually a dancer as well. He was and he was one of those really straight male dancers who slept with just about anything.
Okay.
And not anything female, because
it's good you specified that, because like when you're like, this guy dancer, you sleep with everything, and I'm like, well, good for him.
Well, no, yeah. but as you are kind of insinuating, a lot of male dancers happen to be, by choice of their own, happen to be gay. Well, because of that, there's an awful lot of these females who happen to be female. Now, I'm not saying that they aren't gay. I wouldn't know. But the ones that aren't gay are drawn to those people in their group that aren't gay as well. And so if you're one of the few males that purports to be not gay, then my goodness gracious, there's a lineup. And
it's like a buffet.
Well, I wouldn't want to go and say that, but because that's probably, I don't want to insult anybody who did it, but Connie Darling slept with a lot of women. Anyway, that's probably none of my business.
I don't think anyone could see you giving the thumbs up there to the sky. But
Connie passed away a couple of years ago of throat cancer, so God rest his soul. But the reason I mentioned the fact he was a dancer is because he made me aware of the techniques that dancers use to make themselves aware of movement. If you're just a guy, trying to kick, trying to punch, you don't really consider what it is that you're doing. You're just kicking and punching. But if you're a dancer and you're concerned with the performance aspect, you start realizing that projection and things like that are very important. And so he taught me how to project, at least in the limited way that I was able to, because I remember seeing myself.
Define project.
Project means, well, as a musician, when you go on stage, if you go, "Hi, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to sing a song." The idea of projecting is that you can sort of come in and you can do stuff and you're just going through motions. But if you project, people look at you and they take away more than what you're saying, because you're doing more with it.
Okay. So
that to me is projection. But I was never able to do that really, really well. But I'm told, I never saw myself as being very good at this stuff. But I saw myself, people would come to me and go, "Wow, you're really good." And I'd sort of look at them as if they were out of their minds. But I was just trying to do stuff. So anyway,
you were still that kid in Hudson running around in his $5 judo outfit.
Just about, yeah. I still am. Anyway, I was with Constantine until 1973. And then on my 21st birthday, I joined the Kajukenbo school of Alexander Polentin, who went by the nickname of Kato. And I'd met them before. A high school friend of mine had introduced me to Kato and the school. He was going there. And I feel really bad because I'm thinking of his name, and it's not his name, and the name I'd use isn't his name. So both of them would be upset. One, because one guy didn't introduce me, and the other guy did.
Okay, well, Dad, would you like to state your age and how long ago this was? Just
This was in 1973, so that was 40 years ago.
Okay, yeah, like I have the memory of a goldfish. I can't tell you the name of people I met like 3 weeks ago. So.
Okay, well, anyway. Shane Malloy, that was his name.
Okay.
Anyway.
All right, Justified.
Justified.
All right.
Me and Tim, whatever his name is on that team.
A little more like an elephant, a little less like a goldfish.
Oh, look, it's okay. Anyway, I gave myself the permission to go there, and I started training. And the one thing, so Connie Darling was very good because of his dance background at teaching how to do things in a projecting type of way. So I learned about physicality because he was in awesome shape. You know, he was really flexible. You know, he sort of had the physicality of a weightlifter, but the flexibility and the ability, the dance movement of somebody. He was a principal dancer for Eva von Gensi and the Ballet Jazz Contemporain Montreal. I think that's the name of it. I may be mistaken. And I had sort of like long frizzy hair in those days, so it's kind of funny when I see pictures of myself. Anyway, I went to join Kajukenbo school, and it was there that I really came in contact with that side of me that wanted to learn how to do the fight part properly. Because I would do stuff, before that, I would be training with my friends, and we'd sort of like not hit each other and clap each other on the back and say how great we were at this stuff. But we'd never really had the opportunity to do this. And within 6 months, I went back to the downtown YMCA and I sparred with one of the senior instructors. And I didn't realize how this was happening. But, you know, I scored on him more often than I had ever scored on him before. And that taught me, or it showed me that what I was learning at this Kajukenbo school was far more practical than anything I had ever learned up to that point. Mm-hmm. And the street fighting part, the one thing about Kato was that he was a reputedly good street fighter. He had no problem. He would go down to Crescent Street or some of the other places in town, and he would, if there's somebody there, I mean, this guy weighed like 125 pounds soaking wet. So it wasn't like, you know, he was like some 6'6" rugby player. Yeah. He was a guy who, you know, had sort of long wavy hair, almost, you know, he was Filipino, so he had almost like those feminine features, and with long wavy hair, you could almost imagine. A lot of people would sort of say unnecessarily crude things to him, which he would respond with a flashing feet and hand. And so he had a reputation, plus he had a skill set that he was really, really good at what he did. And so I came to him from Connie with my skill set of being able to do stuff without realizing what I was doing. But he kind of took me, molded me into, you know, I think I got my purple belt in about a month. I got my green belt in 2 months. Within 6 months, I mean, I was already a black belt in the Kempo style under Connie Darling. And when I got there, they said, "Oh, you can't wear a black belt. You're not a black belt. We don't even recognize you as a white belt." At which point I actually thanked them because I didn't see myself as a black belt either. So it enabled me to take a step back. And some friends of mine that have remained friends over these years told me that they came into the school around those days and they would go in and they were looking at me and they're saying, "Wow, this school is awesome. Look at the white belts." Yeah. So I was like, I knew how to do some stuff, but I didn't know how to do much. But as a white belt, I probably looked pretty amazing because, I mean, just having most of the white belts, you're kind of hoping that they can walk across the room without falling on the floor. So the fact that I could kick and punch relatively well made things look. And this was in the days before protective equipment. I mean, protective equipment only came in about a year or so later. And so it was all bare knuckles and stuff like that. So
the good old days.
Not the great old days. No, not the good old days. Equipment is a good thing. It allows you to not get hurt badly, and it allows you to continue training the next day. Anyway, I was training, and then within 6 months I got my brown belt, and then it took another year. I got my black belt in 75, and that's what happened. And then in about 1977, there was a watershed moment. A guy who was a Kajukenbo practitioner from Colorado moved to Montreal, or actually moved to Three Rivers. And I bumped into him at a karate tournament in Montreal. I mean, this guy is like big, strong guy, came up to me, introduced himself, Leonard Andresi, and shook my hand. And he sort of said, I'm a Kajukenbo practitioner. And I'm going, wow. Because I'm like, I'd been to California in '74, but all the Kajukenbo practitioners treated me like a pariah, you know. So they basically said, oh, we don't know who you are. And so...
were they very protective of the art back then?
No, not so much protective. It's just that Kajukenbo is a lot more organized and a lot more friendly today than it was in those days. Because this was the days when the tournaments, like if you were a karate guy and you went to a karate tournament and you won the karate tournament, you were something special, rather than a guy who pretended to punch somebody and got a pretend technique, got a pretend point for doing it, and got to say to themselves, yes, we're awesome. And realistically, you know, when you only pretend to do stuff, you can only claim pretend stuff, because that's what it is. It's, you know, there's some guys who really hate each other. And
this sounds a lot like Guitar Hero.
So I met him, and he and I became very good friends. And this was followed a couple of years later by Kato deciding to resign or retire from teaching. And so he retired from teaching. I thought, well, you know, with Kato retires from teaching, I should be able to do anything I want. And so I went off with my friend Peter Kronwetter, and he invited me to his Kung Fu school where he was training with this Mr. Kwan guy, who was some really ancient and venerable teacher from China who had moved to be with his family in Montreal. And he was a teacher of Eagle Claw, Ying Jiao Pai, and Tong Long Preng Mantis and Tai Chi. This guy was awesome. I mean, like he was the real deal. But, you know, like a lot of Chinese people from the old style, he wanted to teach Chinese people, didn't really want to teach low-fun white guys like me. But, you know, it didn't really matter, because about 5 days after I started training there, I got this cryptic phone call from one of Kato's guys. Hey, Phil, yeah, this is Lenny. Yeah, hi, Lenny. I got a message here from Kato. Yeah, you're being kicked out of Kajukenbo. Send us all your certificates. We're, you know, I was like, what? And so I was like, okay, you know, I was being kicked out. The reason I was being kicked out was because I had the audacity to go and train in another style. Even though everybody else, Kato included, trained in all sorts of styles that he liked to train in, it's basically do as I say, not as I do. And so I went, okay. And at that point, I started becoming more connected with the people in Hawaii who actually practice the art, because even though I had met Sijo Emperado, the founder of Kajukenbo, in 1975 when he came up and gave me, presented our black belt to us, it was as if we didn't really know who this guy was or where he was. And so in 1984, I helped bring Emperado up to Montreal, and we connected. And my friend Leonard Andresi helped. He had the initial contact. And but in 1981, I'd also started doing my Cali training with my Cali guy. And as a matter of fact, it was what Kato said to me. The last thing Kato said to me on the day that he resigned from teaching or retired from teaching in 1980 was, watch out for the old men with the sticks. So I immediately started looking for old men with sticks. I answered an advertisement in a magazine called Official Karate Magazine. It said, Artists America Organization. For information, send $2. And they had a post office box. So I thought, okay, $2. I put $2 in an envelope, sent it off. And I got this letter back saying, Artists American Organization. For a t-shirt, send $10 to... And it was like, oh gosh, I can see where this is going. But on the back of one of the sheets, there was a flyer for a seminar where Grand Tuhon Leo Gaje, who is my Cali teacher still to this day, was giving a seminar in a place called Oneonta, New York, which is about halfway between Binghamton and Schenectady, which are two towns in the United States, in the state of New York. I took a train down from Montreal to Schenectady, and then I took a bus from Schenectady towards Binghamton to this place called Oneonta, and I spent the weekend, swinging a stick around. Now, if you're not used to swinging a stick and you have no idea how to do it, the first weekend is a bit of an eye-opener because you get so many blisters on your hand because you have no idea how to hold it. It's like wearing new shoes. I mean, you're going to get blisters if you wear them and they're a little tight. So I had so many Band-Aids on my hand that it looked like I was wearing gloves. I mean, and I'm talking about not just blisters, but blisters that had broken And so the raw skin underneath was showing. And that's what I was doing. That was my life. I was just doing as much as I could. And it was pretty awesome. But at the same time, less than awesome because it hurt like heck. The Kajukenbo that I was doing at that time was being, I was meeting a lot of people, and they were actually less interested in seeing my Kajukenbo and more interested in seeing the Filipino martial arts that I was practicing because it was starting to have a greater effect. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to step back a bit. In 1980, I went down to California with my wife and daughter, and I spent about 2 or 3 weeks at my uncle's house, and he had a house in Piedmont. And I met a bunch of Kajukenbo people when I was down there. And while in San Diego at a luau, which is a Hawaiian party, I had the chance to see some Filipino martial arts. It wasn't really very complex. It was just like 5 or 6 pairs of people, and they were doing some Sinawali. Sinawali is like a coordinated pairing. Like I hit with my forehand and I hit with my backhand and my backhand, and then they call it Sinawali, which means weaving. So they would weave these little patterns, and it wasn't spectacular, but it just seemed so interesting and neat. So that was why I went to find out what was happening in the Philippines or in the Filipino martial arts with GT Leo Gaje, and I went down there. I went back 3 times that summer. I was there in June, July, and August, and then I fought a tournament in October at the United Nations School. I tied for first place, and then I fought another tournament at the Playboy Club in New Jersey, where I think I did 2nd or 3rd place, and after that, it was just like, I've never stopped.
Yeah, well, I've always come kind of a, like you're a very humble man, and you don't usually just, you're here right now. You're admitting to like even winning these kind of things. It's just I know like we're doing this out of necessity because we actually have to mention this stuff. But we'll talk about martial arts and movies in another show, definitely, like in depth. But I'll just say the quick metaphor. It's like, are you like a Cobra Kai or a Miyagi? It's kind of like, and even if that movie's not extremely accurate when it comes to martial arts, the idea that you got this place where you have to hang every single trophy you got. Like all your trophies were just taking up room in storage, like in our apartment when we were growing up.
Yeah, I actually threw them all away a few years ago.
Yeah, instead of like putting up a zillion trophies at the gym, why is that exactly?
Well, most of the time, a trophy isn't chosen. I mean, I suppose it's the same thing with everything.
I'm a winner of many sportsmanship awards. You have to understand.
Okay, well, no. Yeah. What happened is that you go to a tournament, and there may be 5 people there, and I'm not joking. 5 people, without a doubt. Somebody would think that they would be able to. They'd go to a tournament and see 500 people, and they figure, I'll have a tournament, and 500 people will show up. But an awful lot of the reasons that people show up at the things you do is because they like you as a person or they respect you as a martial artist. So a lot of these guys, nobody respected. And so you'd show up and nobody would show up. I mean, they would expect 30 or 40 or 100 or 200, who knows how many people, and people just wouldn't show up. So they'd have made all these trophies, these ridiculously huge trophies, and most of them are made with plastic.
Expecting like, we're going to have like 70 people fighting for this thing.
Exactly, because they can have it like 3 or 4. I mean, I went down to California last July, and one of my students won a grand championship. And it was great, except he couldn't fit the darn trophy into any of his bags. He literally had to take it apart because it didn't fit in anywhere. So he took it apart. Hopefully it would be small enough to get it into his bag. Because, I mean, the way flights work in North America now is that you can have carry-on, which is like a knapsack or maybe a carry-on bag size. Yeah. Or you can have a suitcase, which case it costs you anywhere from $25 to $30 to bring this thing with you. And if you have an oversized or like overweight bag, then you have to pay more money. Yeah. So if somebody gives you what basically comes down to $15 worth of plastic and tin and says, here, take this home, and it doesn't fit or it's too heavy, sometimes it gets left on the side of the road for no reason other than the fact that trophies haven't changed. I mean, the idea, they're basically grown-up bowling trophies. And bowling trophies are known because basically everybody who bowls gets one of these trophies. So and you go to some tournaments, nobody wants to make the little kids feel bad. So if you have 15 kids, 15 trophies.
I'm one of the qualifiers of this sportsmanship award.
So
yeah, I played softball and I got the sportsmanship award. I felt so good going up to the podium and getting it until on the way home I truly processed what it meant and realized I shouldn't hang it up in my room for 4 years.
Okay,
which I did. Yeah.
So, but there are a lot of tournaments, and so. One of the ironies of it all is that some of the really memorable tournaments, the things that you really had to work hard to achieve, were represented by some of the smaller and less gaudy trophies. And so you realize that, your memory is far more important than someone else's ability to recognize the fact that you have some trophy. Mm-hmm. So, what I did is, I won't say I took the high road, but I took an easier road. I took all the trophies I won. I put them there. I stood in front of them. I had a friend of mine take some pictures, and then I threw them away. And, because I don't know anybody who, at a certain point, it's one thing. When you see these trophies that are like given in golf tournaments, well, they give real silver cups or real crystal things. So if you win, if you're a winner of the Canadian Open or the PGA tournament, there's some real reality to this. So if you put it up, somebody comes up and they don't go, Johnny's karate school and laundromat open tournament of champions, and you won the grand championship because nobody else showed up that day. So you want to be able to say things that are legitimate. You want to be able to actually have things. I mean, if people look at the stuff you have and kind of laugh at you behind your back, you have to accept the fact that you've got a responsibility for that. I mean, you go into a lot of schools and you'll see tons and tons of trophies, and all you do is go to one tournament and see, the little kid, the little 3-year-old black belt is going to get the same trophy as the 28-year-old black belt. They're going to get, if they win the, under 10-year-old grand championship of black belts, and this thing happens. It's not like I'm making this up. Then they're going to get the same response, and people are going to say, and mom and dad, are going to go, my kid's a black belt. And nobody else in the world thinks their kid's a black belt except them and maybe the other moms of the other schools that have like 10-year-old black belts. But
well, if they don't promote them, why are they going to keep paying for classes unless they see some visual results? I'm just saying, put one 10-year-old black belt against one 17-year-old white belt. And it's not like three ninjas where, when I was 9 years old, I wanted to believe that a 60-pound kid could take down a 300-pound mule if they held their brother like a battering ram and ran him into his stomach.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, so I do recall you telling me a story. We're going to go back in time a bit. I'm going to probably have to edit this in, or we'll leave it raw and real.
Okay.
And just keep it as it is. But you told me an interesting story about your first martial arts tournament that you wanted to get to, and grandmother had to drive you.
That was in 1966. I was reading one of those karate magazines again, and I saw that in August of 1966, that there was a tournament, a Canadian Open Karate tournament, available, or not available, but being run that very weekend in Ottawa. Now, I put two and two together. Two and two, for me at that time, meant that I had my aunt who lived in Ottawa. So I had my mother call her sister in Ottawa to see if I went up there, could I be picked up, dropped off at the tournament, brought back, kept overnight, then stuck on a train the next day to come back to Montreal or to Hudson. And it was agreed that this was possible. So off I went. Now, you have to understand that tournaments are no more well attended now than they ever were. They are, you get 200 or 300 people, but this was a tournament not in a high school gymnasium, but at Lansdowne Park. This was a huge place where perhaps 10,000 seats inside this arena. And I bought my ticket, And you can imagine, just imagining where, like, there's a big bowl, there's all the rings, the karate rings were down on the floor, and there were all people there. And then you had these seats, the sea of seats that rose up all around it. Anyway, I bought a ticket, and the ticket was way up in one very, very far away corner.
Yeah.
And I sat there. I couldn't see a damn thing. I was so far away. There was nobody around me. But I knew I was in my right seat.
So you didn't have the balls to just go?
Oh, no, of course not. Well, I mean, this was... I thought that, you know, karate ninjas or whatever else I thought would come in, you know, and drag me, kicking and screaming. So
is it like half empty in there?
Absolutely, no, not half empty, not even a quarter full.
Okay,
I mean,
not even a quarter full.
There was people on the floor, and that's where, and there were a sprinkling of people up on the edges, you know, the first 10 or 15 rows, so that you could see over the people in front of you to see the other places. You could actually see more than one thing happening at the same time. But I was imagine if everything happened at one end of the rink, and I was at the other end of the rink, almost in the top row seats. That's where I was, and that's where I stayed for about 8 or 9 hours. And then I called my aunt, and she came to pick me up. And but it didn't matter. I was just so excited. There were people who were doing what I wanted to do in this place, and they were all together, and they were down there, and I got to see them. So.
Okay. So, so that's definitely something. So you went home, and did you have any partners in crime back then? Like any of our friends that were interested in it too?
Not even a little bit.
Okay. So like you'd tell your brothers, and they'd be like, shut up. And
well, it wouldn't be shut up. It's just that my brother Paul had already gone off and done something else. Peter, the next youngest brother, was 4 years younger than I was. So if I was, you know, 15 or 16, he was 11. So and that's
teenage years. Same distance between me and Serena, your daughter. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Like now that I'm 30 and she's like 35.
She'll be 35.
Yeah, she's going to be 35. Now that we're the same age like that.
They're a lot closer.
We're a lot closer, and we get along a lot better now that we don't have to depend on one phone line in the house.
Well, also, but it's the difference between a 17-year-old and a 21-year-old.
It's not as big of a difference as a 10-year-old to a 15-year-old.
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely. Okay, so that was this monumentous time. Like you were just excited, and a black belt magazine and all this. Like these are the things that made you tick. That's how you would want to go across country, you know, well, across provinces, great distances to watch people fight at a very far distance. Dad, I can't help but notice that all these stories you're telling of trying to learn how to fight or witnessing it really reminds me of an effort ensued in a Lord of the Rings movie. It's like,
well, that's probably why.
Let's go to Mordor. You shall learn how to block there.
Well, I suppose there's that. I mean, I think one of the things about it that makes it so, it rings so true to people who listen to it is the fact that we do go on these quests. We do go and learn how to do things or try to do things and realize that, I mean, it's great when things are available in your neighborhood, but sometimes it's even better when they're not, because then you have the combination of the exercise in going to find, and then the idea of an adventure, the idea that I am going on a quest, and it may work and it may not work, but I'm going on this quest. But if I just think, well, I'm going to try and do this, well, what if it doesn't work? You know, you don't have to put yourself through that stuff. It's like, well, the adventure is the result. The result is the experience. Yeah. And if the experience is positive on top of being a good experience, it's great, but it's not necessary. You could learn a lot by going and realizing that it was a total waste of time. I mean, even that information is a worthwhile knowledge builder.
Life's about experiences. All right. Thank you for listening to this broadcast. At this moment, we're not sure if this is going to be episode 1 or before episode 1, but this is the origin episode. This is where you get into Philip Gelinas' brain and you realize why he ticks and kicks. All right. Thank you for telling us the first part of your extraordinary journey. And next time we take it up, we're going to talk about more interesting stuff.
Okay.
All right. Anyway, thank you all for listening. This is Tuhon and Son. I'm Ryan Gelina.
And I'm Philip Gelina.
And, yep. thank you for not taking an abusively large amount of kicks to the nuts in your youth. So, I came out not too bad.
Okay. Awesome.
All right. Thanks, then.
Bye.